Our next speaker is somebody who I'm imagining you guys really want to hear from because what he's talking about is so important to us today about how to get your first job in tech. So, if anybody remembers, Fleurix has been around since about 2018. And the premise of Fleurix was how do you build a community to talk about exactly these things? And so much of it was how do I come back from maternity leave or paternity leave? How do I change industries? How do I get into technology? What can I do given my experience and ambitions in the world to ultimately make a difference? So, I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker. Reid Young is a lead UI developer. He's a professional poker player, and he comes from a background of philosophy at Wake Forest. So I am pleased to introduce you to Mr. Reid Young.
Hey, what's up, guys? Right, so I'm be talking about getting your first job in tech. There's a ton of information that I want to cover, and I was told I have 25 minutes to do this, and that it also might become 45 minutes. So roll with that info. But I'm gonna go through this kind of like auctioneer style, uh, with the hopes of getting to a long and productive QA. So here we go. Like, click the bottom part here, Suj. Okay. If one does not know to which port one is sailing, no wind is favorable. So if you're not organized, really any of your efforts are just going to lead you all over the place, and you have no idea what's going on. This is especially true in tech because there's so many different cool things that you can learn about and do, and they're all so intricate and complicated. So it's extremely important that you guys start off with like an organized path, and you might not even have a clue what that means at this point, and that's totally cool. So, on organizing your path, to me, that means you're organizing essentially your own happiness within tech, right? So, kind of the three main things as I see it is your products of your work are that you're getting a chance to develop skills, something that you enjoy, something you identified is interesting to you. Another thing is you're getting paid for it. That doesn't necessarily have to be money. It can be education. It can be helping other people. Anything that you enjoy or get utility out of. And then, speaking of utility, happiness. Uh, to me, all of these are interconnected with your work. It's extremely important to me that I try to live my work life this way, and they all feed off of one another. So I think that's the important thing. It doesn't matter which job you're in or if you're changing jobs. All of these should be kind of in harmony, and then, like I was saying, feed off one another. So, what does job ready mean in tech? It depends on the job. So, I'm going to be kind of general, but also try to be actionable about what you want to go for. Find out what excites you. We touched on that a little bit. Choose a path to create a lot of friction. So, by friction, what I mean is you're at least slightly uncomfortable in the situation. That's going to force you to grow. It's going to force your skills to develop, and then you're going to be able to get what you want out of your work. So improving your education. This is another thing. It's like you can create friction by improving your education. You can find a time that you didn't think you had to study. You can put yourself harder. You can create something that you didn't think you'd be able to create. Promise something to a client you don't know how to build yet. You can make these high friction situations where it's sink or swim, and you're going to have to get the value out of it. So there's no room for excuses. That's my favorite way to do it, and recognize a lot of people don't enjoy that. So you can kind of cater that to your own preference. Creating value. When people are getting into tech, especially before their first job, a lot of issue they have is creating value for other people or understanding what that means. So just having like a portfolio site saying like, here's me, that's cool and it can be helpful. Like someone might see it and they'll understand who you are and what you do. But it's a lot cooler if you're actually like out there helping a business do something. Whether or not you're paid for it, also cool. But as long as you're creating value, that's something that someone who might hire you can look at and understand your worth as an engineer or a designer or what have you. For me, I enjoy getting paid when I'm working. So I always say like I like to choose a large combination of these. What will eventually be a complete list here, but I like to get paid or at least barter for your efforts. So an example, my fiance, her first tech experience was with a dog grooming company. Their website was abysmal, so she approached them and said, "Hey, we have two pups and they like to be groomed. What if I make you a website?" We ended up getting a lot of dog grooming out of it. It was awesome, and it was just like a sick win-win for everyone. Um, then, kind of on a I don't know, like cheekier note, I guess, just make sure you get all your agreements in writing, because sometimes people will try take advantage of you in tech, so don't let that happen. Another thing is ideally you're creating code that you can reuse. So, for example, say we make a website for this dog grooming site. I might be able to approach another dog groomer and say, hey, would you like this site? I already have a template for it. I'll give you it for a couple $100. So instead of spending 20 hours making it again, you can just spend 2 hours catering it to their needs. So that's one example, but anytime you're coding, composability is a great idea. And then focus on a single outcome. So like we were saying, if you don't have a focused path, you're just going to be going all over the place. So focusing on one deliverable at a time or one subject at a time is extremely helpful. It's super tempting. I know if you guys are out there trying to figure out what you're interested in, have like 60 tabs open and just chilling on like 1/3 of the way through every YouTube video. I mean, I love doing that still, but have to at least reel it back in to make sure I'm actually doing something. And yeah, the last one is just go. So like, just do stuff. I hear a lot of people saying like, "Well, I don't know how to do this. I don't know, how to deploy my website after I make it." It doesn't matter. Like you'll figure it out. Like you'll get to that step. Start building stuff. See, this question from every single person I talk to is getting into tech. I don't know who wants my code. How do I find these people? Like, what am I even building? Like, what if there's no dog groomers around? There's bloggers, restaurants, gyms, tech groomers, startups, freelance photographers, plenty of breweries and bars in Charlotte, boat rental companies, realtors. I'm just making up stuff. There's a ton more. You guys using the internet is a huge part of being a web developer. So yeah, I mean, you can find people who have crappy looking websites. They're all over the place, believe me. And they're very welcoming of your help. Where to learn? All sorts of places. College, very expensive and time consuming and usually not relevant once you're finished, but do you feel like that? Boot camps are a lot more focused, a little cheaper than college, and you'll typically come out with something you can present to a hiring manager or a company that's interested in you. So that's helpful. It sort of depends how much you as a person need to be pushed. If you need someone to say, "Hey, build this today, build this tomorrow, this is due," bootcamp can be great. YouTube has literally everything. It is incredible. Anything from basic beginning talks like this one, negotiating your salary, all sorts of things, any part of tech, it's all free. I mean, definitely take advantage of it. There's a ton of sites also that are a bit more focused. One is Code Academy, Free Code Camp. Lead Code is a bit more advanced, and that would be for like algorithmic training and things like that, like the real nerdy stuff. And then there's paid video courses. So one of my favorite sites is called Team Treehouse. They have a ton of different subjects that you can go through and like a week-long free trial thing. I don't work with them or anything like that. That's just where I started and I loved it. Udemy and Coursera are very similar, although a little bit more focused. So it's sort of like between maybe a boot camp and YouTube. And how to learn. So we want that focus, like we've been talking about the whole time. Efficiency is a big thing. I think that can kind of come from focus as well. But just make sure that you're not wasting time learning every single thing about every single thing, that you're focused on actually building what you set out to build. And you'll learn as you do that. You'll learn as you continue to build and iterate on what you're building. Setting medium-term goals. So when I'm talking about building things, the idea is to actually finish it. Tons of engineers will set out to build like a side project one weekend, and then they have to go back to work Monday, doing whatever, and just never actually finish what they're doing. So if you don't have a finished product to show off to someone, they're not going to know what you did. And so what's the point of it other than, you've learned something cool, that's great, but hard to communicate. Taste a lot. So what I mean by this is go around building different things. So maybe like medium-term goal to medium-term goal. You might want to try something in design. You might want to try something in front-end development. You might want to try like an algorithm problem. There's tons of different areas. You can spend a lot of time getting to the particulars of all of them. But once you understand what you enjoy, that will allow you to be a lot more focused and efficient in creating those goals. And then iterate your process. So you may not like what you taste the first time. So you may not like design and you want to get into algorithms and things that are like, I don't know, super particular about the way coding works and memory and things like that. So it's important to say like, hey, do I like this? Do I not? But I like doing that after you've achieved one of your medium-term goals. So at least see through what you're working on. And then rewriting, one of the best and like craziest to me still pieces of advice I've had in coding was I wrote an application and it worked. And then the person teaching me said, okay, delete it all and rewrite it. And I was like, dude, it works. Like it's doing the thing already. Like you can play tic-tac-toe. It like, check it out. But deleting it and rewriting it all allowed me to re-implement everything that I had learned while I was writing it, and the code was maybe half the size and tons more efficient. So it's pretty unbelievable how rewriting, and you'll see this even if you do have a job in tech, when you come back to something like 3 months later, you can like crush whatever is there and make it a lot more efficient for you and ideally for other people that you're working with. And go a level deeper is another great thing. So if you understand the technology that's helped to create the technology you're working with, it's pretty impossible for anyone to say that you're doing something wrong there. Okay, now kind of for the fun part of this, networking and getting interviews. So, I mean, a lot of what actually gets you the job. So where to network? Coding meetups are great places. Conferences like Fleurix. LinkedIn is incredible. I'll touch on it in a bit, but if you don't have a LinkedIn account, just get one going. Put literally anything on there now. Your first project as you're going, tag, any of your coding buddies, stuff like that, because you can always point to it 5 years from now and be like, hey, that's when I started. If you don't have something like that out there, then, it's going to be tough to say like, I have 5 years experience or, where is that experience? Online education platforms, a lot of them come with like a Slack group, things like that, Discord, Facebook groups. But the reason you want to network and then constantly network, a lot of people will network their butt off, get a job, stop. I don't like that mentality because you lack understanding of what's going on around you in the marketplace. So understanding the marketplace, like what you're worth as a developer, what's out there, ways you can learn more or improve your situation, improve your skills. That all comes from networking, talking to different recruiters, talking to different people who code in different industries than you. You get to find ways to help other people. Super important. Yeah, so you get to understand like where you're going. It may not be that you're in your dream job from day one. That's completely cool. And I mean, it happens to pretty much everyone because you have to start somewhere. But you get to choose your next steps. So very much like choosing your next like project as you're learning, you might want to choose your next job, your next contract, your next company. I mean, there's all sorts of different options out there, and you don't get those choices unless you keep those doors open. So yeah, that's creating your own options. And then yeah, ideally the whole thing scales. So you're just building off of where you started. So you might start out making a to-do app, but eventually you've helped like four companies do something amazing on multi-million dollar projects, and it really does work that way. And yeah, lastly, I think lastly, one of the most important things is just being in touch with demand. So you understand what you're worth as you develop your skill set, because it uh, it grows a lot quicker, especially in code. So if you think of coding as like providing value at scale over time, that payment is very different to someone who does something that does not work at scale. So your demand should increase a lot quicker than kind of like a linear output job. So if the better you get in coding, you're able to produce value for say maybe like 40 people, then 1,000 people, then a million people. Uh, a raise of 3% per year doesn't make too much sense. Yeah, then moving on to more of like the getting an interview part. This is what I call the job trinity. So there's a hiring manager, a recruiter, and you. So what the heck's a hiring manager? It's someone with a management position usually. Typically, they organize your interview. They represent you to the company, and usually they have the most weight and whether or not you are getting a position. So they're like the go or no go person. Uh, Other people who are interviewing you or maybe in the room while you're being interviewed can influence that decision, but usually the buck stops with them. So what's a recruiter? I don't want to offend any recruiters here. They represent you to a hiring manager. They match your skill set to the particular position in the marketplace. So they say, hey, Reid does this, hiring manager X, you guys need this job, meet Reid. They do have a vested interest in getting you the job. So there's a lot of misconception there, especially when you're talking negotiating salary. It's like who gets paid what and why. Like, are they taking some of what I am giving? Don't really know. No, they a lot of the time will get commission based on whether or not you get a job. So they want you to be happy. They want the hiring manager to be happy. And who are you? Deep question. You have in-demand skills that create value at scale, like we discussed. You're worthy of payment that reflects that value. So as your skill set grows, so should your pay. Understanding of how your skills fit within the marketplace. So that, sorry, I guess that comes from all the networking that you're doing. So yeah, like before, this kind of flow uh, is how like a job is created and fulfilled. So you might start at the top with the hiring manager. They say, "Hey, we need a job, or we need a person to fulfill this role on our team." They reach out to a recruiting company. The recruiting company reaches out to you. You meet the hiring manager. The hiring manager interviews you. They talk with the recruiter and say, "Hey, man, Reid's awesome." They go back to you. You get hired. You work with the hiring manager. So that's a typical job funnel. I like to think of the idea of it as like a lot of people will typically just blast their resume out to whomever, and they're like, "Well, I've applied to 1,000 jobs." Um, I think that's kind of a crappy attitude because you are not really creating any connections when you're doing that. So a much better idea is to reverse that funnel. So if you think about it, like you're tossing your resume out with the hopes of meeting a recruiter, with the hope of meeting a hiring manager, if you can get in touch with the recruiter directly for a job that you know is open, you've already cut down, you know, the percentage that you will get that job. You'll increase it by so much. If you can talk to the hiring manager directly, even if it's after your first phone call with the recruiter, and just say like, "Hey, I have all these technical questions. You probably don't know the answer to them. Can I talk to this person?" If you can get on the phone with them, that is insane because it usually puts you in like the top three already. So you've gone from just blasting thousands of copies of your resume to randoms to being like 1 out of 3 for getting a job. For some reason, here's my LinkedIn profile. So questions about your job. You'll be prompted to ask questions about the job and at different times, and your answers can change over time if you want to be strategic about setting yourself up to get a job. So here's some that I like to use and that are helpful. What technologies are used day to day? So what's the official title of this role that can help when you're trying to understand like the amount the role should pay? Is there anything specific I can prepare for the interview? I love this question because you will go into an interview and without asking this, it's sort of like, hey, all of this subject is on the table. Sometimes people have already interviewed for this role, then talk to the same recruiter. And usually there's also like a debrief. So if you get an answer to this role, or sorry, to this question, it is insanely helpful. They'll be like, yeah, make sure you learn how this particular thing works, and you know almost what's going to be in the interview. So it's like reading the interview basically. Um, Not that that's good, but then yeah, you can understand the recruiter's role with the company and with the hiring manager, so you can get a feel for who you would be working for, and you can get a feel for that recruiter's experiences with the hiring manager. So it's super important because you're going to be talking to both parties about your potential job. Kind of another iteration of the third point. Have other candidates struggled with anything? So you might get a more general answer than just like, "Hey, here's what to know for the interview." But yeah, that can be extremely helpful. Like, "Oh, this one guy was clueless on this, and that's why we passed on him." If you know that, you can show up and know your stuff in that area. The pre-interview for the hiring manager. Usually, you'll have like a phone call screening when you want a new job. So uh, this is a great time to explore what the hiring manager wants out of you for this position and also what you want out of them when you work with them. So a lot of people think it's just a one-way street, but it should also be like, can you develop your skills in this position, or you're going to get what you want out of this position? So specific questions about the team. Uh, you want to know who you're working with. Like, are they good people? Do they gel? Do they complement your skill set? How does the role fit into the company? You get to understand your impact on the company. So some people like being kind of siloed away doing their own thing, you know, a small project for a few people. That's cool. Um, some people want to have larger impact and work on like the company's main website or something like that. Who will I work with most often? So you want a good team for sure. How often will we be in touch? So meaning the hiring manager. It's an interesting question because hiring managers or managers in general have lots of different strategies for managing. So the more you're in touch with a person, generally the better. So you can understand if they are trying to micromanage people, um, and also if they will make time to speak to you if you need to. And I like this because it's specific and it allows a hiring manager to talk about the actual role. Can you give me an example of a clearly defined growth opportunity with this role? That sounds pretty processed, so put your own spin on that one. But uh, it's saying, hey, like if I want to learn to do other stuff at this place, Can you make that happen? And from your experience, what does success look like in this role? Um, Again, kind of corporate sounding, but it allows you to understand what the person needs from you, and it allows you to understand where you're coming in and where you may need to go in order to fulfill this role properly. So, no surprises here going into the interview, ideally. How do they consider work-life balance? It's always good to know. Like, are they just going to work your face off for 70 hours a week and then you don't get overtime, that sort of thing? What do you do before you're promoted to your current role? And why did you take this promotion? I love this because it gives the hiring manager to talk about what they did before they got into management. A lot of the time, especially with technical hiring managers, it's people who really love to code and really love the particulars of it. And they just got so good, they kind of were asked at one point, hey, we'll give you a raise if you manage people. They don't code anymore, so they welcome the chance to talk about it. And it's a great chance to create a connection and understand the company's evolution over time. And this one's kind of sneaky. Is the position one that the team needs to be filled quickly, or any variation of this? So you can kind of tap into the demand of the marketplace for this particular job. So if you're talking to a recruiter as well as a hiring manager, you can understand that, oh, they need this job filled right now. And say you have an interview, it goes pretty well. And you go back to the recruiter and start talking about salary, you have a lot more leverage there because you know they need the role now. So salary expectations and negotiation. Just a quick aside I wanted to do because when I was crunching these numbers, they kind of blew my mind. Dollar per hour is $2,000 a year. Okay, if you put that 2 G's into the market and have a 7% return, and you don't touch it for 30 years, that's $16,300. If you do that for your $2,000 a year, every year until you retire, so say 30 years, that's $175,000. So that's a pretty bonkers amount of money for negotiating an extra dollar per hour. So for a recruiter or hiring manager, that's typically a meaningless amount of money. For you, that can be like, I don't know, a pretty sweet retirement, or a struggle, or just having to be a lot more proactive with your savings than you need to be. So you'll get asked by recruiters, and they will try super hard to pigeonhole you into giving an answer a lot of times about your salary expectations. So before you interview, you don't have any leverage. They don't know who you are. They don't know your skill set. So you don't want to give a specific answer, because if they say like, "Hey Reid, what are you thinking about salary?" and I say, "Oh, I want $300 an hour," they'll be like, "Nah." So you're done. So you want to give non-specific answers. So I like to say something competitive. Um, they'll be like, "Well, what does that mean?" Then just say, "I don't know. Like, I've talked to this company. They like me, and they seem like they paid pretty well, but I don't know exactly what it is." So just keep it vague at first. And yeah, this cannot be overstated. Don't be the first one to say a number for real, because that will anchor the entire rest of the conversation toward that number. So if you say, "Hey, I want $30 an hour," they may have given you $50 an hour, and all of a sudden you're going to be fighting for $33 an hour instead of $55 an hour. So don't talk numbers until they talk numbers. Pay bands are just kind of ranges that different roles will give out. So an intro role might have like a $20 to $30 range, just a rough example. But that's called a pay band. So generally, the offer that you receive for an intro role has a particular pay band associated with it within a given company. So after the interview, you're going to align expectations. So if you're talking salary, this means that you are sticking to your guns about what your skills are worth. You know how the interview went. Ideally, you know how in demand you are from talking to the hiring manager earlier. And this is the point where you can ask for more. So if you're going into employment, this could mean you're talking about 401k, talking about days off, talking about your salary increasing over time, bonuses. There's tons of different variables. So they'll say maybe, hey, we can't do $50 an hour, but we can do 45. And you say, well, you know, this other company offered me 50, and ideally they did. But could we talk about maybe adding more to my bonus or adding more paid time off per year? There's different sources of value that you can manipulate that the company might be more or less willing to give to you that essentially add up to the same value for you. So if you probe, you will find what's available. If you don't, they'll give you what's available. And ideally, all this is thought out ahead of time. Money can be emotional for a lot of people. So I like planning ahead, having responses for questions that you have already anticipated. And then for the last couple slides here, I just wanted to show like some salary information in Charlotte. You can see at the very bottom here, this is like a 3 to 5 year position. Average is like 84 a year. There's a ton of websites, so you guys can check the numbers here. This one's Indeed.com. There's another called Glassdoor. There's another called Levels.fyi. But you can mix and match and understand that these are average numbers. So if you're working with a large company, you know, the range can be pretty large, as you see. And don't let that far right number impress you or scare you either. There are certainly jobs out there that pay more than that. Yeah, and lastly, just say what's up. I'm on LinkedIn. Let's network. And if you guys have any questions, ready to roll.